Okay. Uh, so for those who are joining us as participants, I'll allow you to talk once we start the Q&A session of this webinar. The option is turned off for now. Uh, in case you have any query, you can raise your hand. There is this option in the settings that you can use. I'll direct your queries towards the panelist at the session end. Uh, because this is the first webinar being conducted by the Center for Strategic and Contemporary Research, we also expect that the participants may face some glitches owing to the internet speed and unawareness of the platform Zoom. But I assure you that my team is working behind the scenes, and we'll try to resolve your issues as possible as can. The topic for this webinar is altered state of the world post COVID-19, opportunities and challenges. This is the first part of the series that we want to conduct. We shall be inviting different experts. Today we have experts who have studied international relations and history as their academic discipline. And so just my brief comment on the issue that we are currently facing due to coronavirus. Uh, this pandemic has just brought to the front the fragility of the international security architecture. And it has also exposed the chinks in the political, economic, and social orders of the world. We, as a center, we have been working on these issues in the past. Last week, we published a policy paper uh, in which we assess the economic and social implications of COVID-19. In 2-3 days back, we published an article on our website that looked at how Corona has affected the operational paradigms of the professional militaries around the world and the implication for Pakistan. Just some general observations that I have come across, what people have been predicting, what would happen because of COVID-19. There is this general belief that this episode of this pandemic will end the economic arrogance of the world at large. There will be more focus on internal supply chains rather than global supply chains. So some people are postulating that have it will have a negative impact on the globalization as well. People are saying that there will be more investment in healthcare and science in the time to come. There will be more state intervention. Some people are saying that there will be a shift of power from US to China. We can witness a decline in populism in the time to come. There will be the erosion of theocracies and religious exhibitionism. Scientists will be hailed as new heroes, and postmodernism as a social science will be consigned to dustbins. So that being said, these were some general observations. We'll be starting our webinar now. The format that we will be adopting for this is first speaker, we have Dr. Tughral Yamin with us. I'll be introducing him. He'll be sharing his remarks on this issue. Then I'll be introducing our next speaker, Dr. Ilhan Niaz. He will be sharing his remarks, and subsequently, I'll be introducing Dr. Farhan Anif Siddiqui. Then he will share his remarks. And at the end of the session, we'll take question and answers from our participants. So starting off, I'll introduce Professor Dr. Tughral Yamin. Dr. Tughral Yamin Saab earned his PhD from Department of Defense and Strategic Studies, Qaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. Uh, in 2013, he was awarded a research fellowship in the international program of the Cooperative Monitoring Center's International Laboratories, Albuquerque, New Mexico, USA. Professor Yamin has authored several books and hold expertise in areas as diverse as his professional career. As an academician, Professor Yamin has taught at the Pakistan Army Command and Staff College, Quetta, NDU Islamabad, and the National University of Modern Languages, Islamabad. Currently, he is serving as the Associate Dean of Center for International Peace and Stability at the Department of Peace and Conflict Studies, National University of Science and Technology. Over to you, Dr. Tughral Yamin, sir, the participant.
Tala Saab, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for your very kind introduction. I'll say a few words about my take on how Corona has impacted humanity and how will it impact the humanity in future. I think you very ably touched on many things, but a few more points that I can give. One thing I think out of this crisis, one thing which will emerge will be more humanity. We know that this virus has spared neither a prince nor a pauper. The Prime Minister of UK has been infected by it, the Crown Prince has been infected by it, and so many common people, nameless people, have died because of it. So, as you said very correctly, the arrogance of big powers is going to decline. So it will be something like, I think, the end of colonialism. Perhaps I'm being very ambitious. The jury is still, I don't think the jury has gone out to give a verdict on how this has impacted our lives. But yes, it is going to change things dramatically. For example, just before I joined in, I was taking a class online. So I think in future, perhaps brick and mortar structures of universities will vanish, or if they don't vanish, perhaps they'll be become largely redundant. So new concepts will be coming in, but as I was talking to Dr. Siddiqui Saab, Qaid-e-Azam could not do it because many of their students in remote areas have the issues of connectivities and bandwidth. So after this crisis is over, I hope it's over soon, the governments all over the world, and particularly governments in third world countries like ours, will be forced to provide better internet coverage for their people, because the entire business of our daily lives has been drastically curtailed to our laptops or our smartphones or the tablets that we are holding in the hands. We have nothing else to do. The entire business of running education systems or other things or decision making is now all in line. So there are a number of opportunities. Wars are on hold. Pakistan and India are not considering fighting each other. Instead, one of the most dramatic things which have happened recently is the video call of SAARC leaders. Mr. Modi called it. Our Prime Minister did not join. He sent his special assistant to him on health affairs, Dr. Zafar Mirza, to join in his stead. But other prime ministers and heads of states were there. So India, we know, has been playing a spoiler in case of SAARC. SAARC has been reduced to a moribund organization. But there's been a sudden revival. Now they are thinking of common strategies. They're thinking of creating a fund. Pakistan has now asked for a video conference of all health ministers. So these are positive indicators. You're not threatening each other. You're not talking about line of control violations. There have been no line of control violations. Yes, internal security, there still have been some bomb blasts, but very negligible. In Afghanistan, there are still attacks on Sikh temples and other stuffs. But within these two large South Asian countries, which have been at each other's throat for 70 years, there is a willy-nilly acceptance that you have to talk to each other. You have to find common ground to fight a common enemy. You cannot go on bombing each other or conducting surgical strikes or strikes on Balakot, things of that sort. So I think there is going to be a drastic change. How diplomacies function, how healthcare systems operate. There is also opportunity of joining forces with scientists and healthcare leaders all over the world of how, for example, virologists are trying to find new cures to this thing in Germany or other countries. By the way, America is nowhere near finding a cure for it. So perhaps they might also in future, instead of fighting with China or uh, not indulging in this blame game of whether it's Chinese crisis, Chinese virus or Wuhan crisis, Wuhan virus or things of that sort. Perhaps they would now try to learn from the Chinese scientists or healthcare administrators of how did they win this battle of Corona. So I think if wise sense prevails, I do not know how many people will survive this. I really don't know. In America, they are predicting 200,000 deaths, which is a huge number. I think 3,000 was a number that they gave for the 9/11 bombings, and they killed hundreds and thousands of people in Afghanistan and Iraq and all over the world. But if there are 200,000 deaths in the US, how are they going to cope up with it? Will they continue to fight with other people, or would they try to find common grounds with them? So I see a lot of good coming out of it. This is, I think, a second chance to humanity. Uh, as far as climate change is concerned, I think the world is already healing itself because the smoke emissions have reduced drastically. Uh, there are no more cars on the road. There are no more planes in the skies. The skies, for once, are blue. I believe the sky is blue once again in Beijing, which is one of the most polluted cities in the world. You can hear the birds chirping and twirling, and so I find a lot of hope. But the point is, we should start working towards a post-corona conflict scenario. Uh, I'm sure this curve will flatten in weeks' time, or 2 weeks' time, or 3 weeks' time, or a month's time, or 2 months' time, or 3 months' time. But somewhere it is going to flatten out. And what we have to look at is how will life be after Corona is over? How can humanity work together for the better cause of the common man? So that's how I look at it. Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Tughral Yamin has aptly summarized certain aspects of what we can hope to see after this pandemic has been dealt is after this pandemic is dealt with. Uh, some pointers that I could glean from his comments are that he hopes to see better internet coverage in Pakistan, particularly while referencing the problem that the students are facing in public sector universities. And one thing which will surely emerge out of this will be humanity. Uh, Perhaps the end of colonialism as well, since the virus has spared neither a prince nor a pauper. Um Dr. Tughral Yamin Saab believes that shifts in diplomatic ventures can be foreseen. Uh, there is good coming out of it. We have to assess what will that be. Next in line, I have Dr. Ilhan Niaz with us. Um Dr. Ilhan Niaz Saab is an associate professor of history at the Qaid-e-Azam University. And most recently, he has authored a book titled as The State During the British Raj, Imperial Governance in South Asia from 1700 to 1947. Dr. Ilhan Niasab, over to you, sir. Uh, Please make it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Let me begin by, let's say, going a little bit further into the past, but not too far back. Between 1900 and 1980, smallpox killed about 300 million people. The 1918-1919 flu pandemic killed between 20 and 40 million people, including perhaps as much as 10 to 12 million people in South Asia. Till the 1950s, polio was killing or leaving people with lifetime disabilities at the rate of about 500,000 people a year. And if we look at the world before antibiotics, basically a mid 20th century innovation, then what we see is that even in the most advanced industrialized countries, life expectancy was in the mid 1940s. Then antibiotics come in, and suddenly it becomes possible to treat all sorts of microbial ailments, and life expectancy nearly doubles. So, like these days, life expectancy in the advanced countries is about 80, whereas life expectancy in developing countries like ours is also in the mid 60s. It used to be roughly about 30 at the time of our independence. So, what we've seen over here, of course, over here is that microbes have caused devastation throughout the 20th century. Pandemics and endemic diseases have killed off far more people than all the world wars and military conflicts and various other civil conflicts that the world has endured. At the same time, we also need to consider that since the 1950s and the early 1960s, the last 50 years or so, we've been winning against our microbial antagonists. And this has been partly, of course, the result of widespread vaccination. It's been partly due to the antibiotic revolution. It's also been partly due to our ability to increasingly understand the human genome and the genomes of the diseases that afflict us. And all of this has led to a vast expansion in our biomedical knowledge. And the fact is that this has led us for the last two generations to expect to live in a world where we are in command of our disease environment. But the fact is that for the first, let's say, 99% of human history, we were not in control of our disease environment. And the fact that we were not in control of our disease environment did not make us more humane, it did not make us more enlightened, it does not make us more compassionate. All the wars and civil conflicts and terrible disasters of the 20th century that you read about, first 50, 60 years of it, they all happened in the context of these dreadful, widely prevailing diseases, pandemics, etc. So the last 50, 60 years have been basically a bit of an aberration in terms of our long-term historical development, our long-term historical consciousness. Everything that used to happen before 50, 60 years ago took place in the dreadful shadow of imminent death, imminent incapacitation from what are today relatively harmless and easily treatable diseases. Now, what have we done with our recent, and I would say very recent, ascendance over nature? What we basically done with that ascendance is that we have completely pulverized our natural environment. We have expanded human activity into parts of the world where historically human activity was not present. We have torn down our rainforests, we have torn down our biodiversity reserves, our natural habitats. We have contributed to global warming. And as we have destroyed our natural habitat and as we have warmed our planet, we've actually created a situation where our very recent and I would say tenuous ascendance over our microbial environment is now in very great jeopardy. The thawing of the Arctic and Siberia is all set to release vast numbers of viruses against which we have no defense. What happened in the context of COVID-19 is, straight out of the textbook warnings that specialists in infectious diseases have been warning about for decades, that if you keep pushing into nature, if you keep bringing people into prolonged contact with animals that host viruses against which we do not have immunity, but those viruses can potentially jump into our immune systems that are naive to them, then basically you are setting the stage for a world of not one, but a succession of pandemics. And this is basically the world that we are now facing. That COVID 19 is, I would say, the first in a wave of dreadful new diseases that will emerge from our destruction of our natural habitat. The basic mechanisms through which COVID-19 emerged have been very well documented by scientists in Nature and other important publications, so I won't rehash those. But the same thing is happening over and over again. So we should be very sanguine about any prospects of this being a one-off incident. Rather, I strongly suspect that we are looking at the return of our historical disease environment. Now, if we, let's say, revert to our historical disease environment, last 50, 60 years being an aberration, that has vast implications for human societies, for human economies, for political systems, for ideologies. Now, what does history teach us about this? Well, basically, what history teaches us is that the more insecure people are, the more vulnerable people are, the more likely they are to fall victim to identity politics, the more likely they are to fall victim to extreme ideologies like fascism or communism going back to the early part of the 20th century, the more likely they are to adopt a sort of fatalistic millenarian type of outlook towards life and basically give up hope and give up any chance of being productive in this world. So otherworldliness, esotericism are all likely to increase as a result of this. So in this context, what we are in a way facing is a very uncomfortable for the last two generations, a return to our historical condition. Basically, we are about to return to a world of Darwinian corrections, something which is a very important part of history, an integral part of it indeed. But something that we have gotten unused to over the last 50, 60 years. But now we are having to get used to it again. So that is, I fear, what lies ahead. There are no good options in this thing. I don't see any great hope for the human race at any rate, given what we've done on climate change. And the fact that it is basically at this stage runaway is out of our control. So, what I do see, however, is a world of hardening borders, hardening ideologies, a world where increasingly self sufficiency is the key word for major economies and also of economies in the global south. Uh, I see a world in which people have to get used to the idea that you can literally catch your death of cold just by going out and doing your daily routine. And I see a world in which all sorts of xenophobic and extreme thinking is likely to feed off this existential dread and insecurity that is now making a dramatic comeback. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Dhanyasa. A quick take from your comments. Although you have discussed certain aspects that I would want to reiterate once again, but starting from the conclusion, you have said that this this episode of Corona may lead people to adopt extremist ideologies. It will instill a certain sense of complacency, and people may adopt more esotericism may increase with time, because people are more prone to adopt fatalistic interpretations coming out of this, and we need to avoid them. Apart from that, you have discussed that you see a world of hardening borders and ideologies, and a world characterized by xenophobic identities. You have also talked about how COVID-19 is humans' reversion to decades-old biological environment, and you brought Darwin as well, Charles Darwin as well into the debate. Uh, it was very nice hearing your comments. Now, uh, I would want to introduce Dr. Farhan Hanif Siddiqui Saab. He is the associate professor at the School of Politics and International Relations, Qaid Azam University. He has done his PhD from the University of Karachi and has done his master's from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Over to you, Dr. Farhan Hanif Siddiqui Saab.
Thank you, Talha, for extending invitation to be part of this webinar today. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Right. So let me just start by touching upon some key questions of theory. I'll speak about international relations, but I'll also link that up with domestic politics because most times it is not very easy to distinguish or differentiate between what are foreign policy and domestic policy developments. So I'll throw up a number of questions. I'll identify some of the challenges for the future, both from an international relations and a domestic politics perspective, and then round it up with what I believe are some of the key concerns that we should think about in days to come. So the first, I think, element is this notion about there should be a rethinking towards an expanded definition of security. So we've been invoking Barry Buzan. We've been speaking about or thinking that we need to move beyond a very traditional military-oriented definition of security to have economic, social, cultural, and environmental threats, and bring them up to the point where they're regarded as security threats as well. But I think one of the key points that we are missing out on in Barry Buzan's conception of an expanded definition of security is his element or concept of securitization and the contention that security is merely a speech act. It only comes into existence because state elites define it as such. It's not an objectively constituted threat emanating, for example, from an anarchic world. So again, in terms of speech acts and these elitist speech acts, I see and I conjecture that there is or there will develop in time or over time a disjuncture between state and civil society centered speech acts. And I'll explain this further in a little while. And the key question that I think we need to think about is how do you transform these elitist speech acts, which are fixed on very zero-sum military, sovereignty-oriented, nationalism-oriented frameworks and make them more amenable to a very positive sum framework of non-military sectors, which again incorporates social, environmental, and economic concerns as well. A second point in terms of the virus and its impact and the challenge is the nature of the world that we live in today. So unfortunately, the world has taken a very narcissist turn towards the politics of hate, power aggrandizement, exclusionary politics. We're living in a post-truth world, which is characterized less by rational debate, energized more by emotional appeals and fake news, which makes it difficult for states to cooperate with each other. So if I were to make a comparison, let's say if the coronavirus broke out in the 1990s, where the language, where the debate and the discourse was about human security or cooperative security or regional security frameworks, I think the way that the world has addressed the challenge today would have been different if this had broken out in the 90s. So when the American president refers to the coronavirus as the Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus, and then when the Chinese retaliate by saying that this virus was spread by American soldiers in China, and that is all part of a whole biopolitics warfare, it only tells us that we have to do a lot in terms of addressing this calamity, and that we need to recover this human security, cooperative security debates of the 1990s, which unfortunately are now lost on us. I think a third major concern with respect to the virus, its impact, its challenges, is about the coordination problems. And again, a key IR theoretical question, that how do you achieve cooperation under conditions of anarchy? How do you move beyond the prisoner's dilemma, where each actor's self-interest to pursue rational gains unfortunately makes them worse off than what they originally were. So the question is, how do states take actions both individually and collectively that reduce risk, and they avoid actions, again, individually and collectively, that produce risk? And a more challenging question is that how many times would state elites have to fall into the trap of death and destruction in order for them to realize the benefits ensuing from cooperative tasks and policies? I think this is one of the most urgent questions today. So this tragedy of the coronavirus it alerts us to a further strengthening of our global health and environmental regimes, staking our future in terms of long-term goals and policies and interactions that prepare us for these health and environmental risks, because they will only increase over time. I don't think they will reduce. And if there is one silver lining amongst all this, at least because of globalization and the fact that communication is much easier these days, states are learning from each other and what good practices to put in place. So social distancing, for example, is one where states could learn from each other through Twitter, social media. El Salvador, a country which is hardly in the news, this small tiny state in Central America, this state actually took the lead in delaying electricity bills payments by a couple of months, which it said that residents can now pay over a period of 2 years. And this is one strategy for social and economic alleviation for the people that even the Pakistani state is now putting in place. So what does the present situation alert us to? Health, environmental hazards, disasters, they can loom from and they can spring from anywhere. The superpower conduct up until now, it's truly abominable, with both the US, as I stated earlier, blaming each other rather than leading the world or taking responsibility in terms of cooperative patterns to tell the world that this is how we need to have policies or make policies which deal with this threat. Another element is, and I think this is what we've come up to, is that no measure of nuclear weapons or missiles or submarines or weapons of destruction, can deal with medical and health threats. In fact, they only exacerbate them. If you have heavy investments in armaments, I think they negatively impact much needed public investments on health and education. And this is true for all states, whether they're states of the North, whether they're states of the South. We see that their health and emergency systems are stretched beyond limits. There is a shortage of ventilators in the US. And this only tells you that we need more effective utilization of resources and investments in health and education, and of course, the environment as well. So what I see is a rising global public debate engendered through civil society speech acts on effective government spending in these areas, expand the nature and the definition of security as well. And this comes again, irrespective of whether a state or society is developed or otherwise. Before the virus broke out, we were already witnessing pro-democracy protests in Iraq, in Hong Kong, Lebanon, Ecuador, Chile, Tunisia, Egypt, other states. And over time, I think all of these issues about health and environment, they will link up with these pro-democracy protests, and there'll be increasing calls upon states to provide basic provisions to their citizens. Another key area, something that Ilhan touched upon, is again a rising civil society debate on the fact that we need to reorder the element or the measure of wealth within societies. And we need to move towards socioeconomic systems that at least value some form of social welfare and, of course, a measure of equality as well. And what I see now is that elitist speech acts in times of this corona crisis are at a loss. It is very easier for, let's say, state elites to speak on sovereignty issues, make enemies of other states. But when it comes to convincing their own people that they'll be able to provide rations and food and clothes and health and other facilities, and they're completely at a loss. And this is why I think most state elites, they've come out with this statements and discourse, which tend to undermine the virus, saying that it only affects a certain sector of the population, does not impact anyone, because states at the end of the day do not have a capacity to cater to the problems of the people. And this is something that we need to think about and address in the post coronavirus scenario. And again, the world economy and the domestic economies across the are at a severe risk, and the divide between the rich and the poor will only exacerbate. Moody has downgraded Pakistan's GDP growth rate to 2 to 2.5% for this year, and that is I think, a major challenge. Politically, again, you see authoritarian interventions are coming around. So you have, Hungary, for example, and Viktor Orban, who's already, made the move towards autocratic governance. So coronavirus has provided, himself and his regime a perfect opportunity to, disband or discard democracy, enhance his own political power, make use of the virus in order to again consolidate himself in power. So we should be mindful and take this into consideration. The fact that authoritarian interventions will continue, and state elites will find it convenient to again make politically incorrect statements, something that we've seen yesterday as well in some interviews from across the border, and of course identity groups as well. For example, the Shias and the Tablighis in this country being blamed from spreading the virus. I think these are challenges internally as well. You can even add up the 18th Amendment here, because coronavirus has provided an opportunity, for these provincial governments to come out and practice and implement policies as distinct from policies of the federal government. And this is something which even the Prime Minister was forced to concede when he said that after the 18th Amendment, the provinces are autonomous to implement the kind of policies that they deem fit in order to deal with this crisis. So at the end, just to conclude very quickly, so again, if you ask this question or conjecture, whether state elites are ready for such health and environmental calamities, I think the answer is a big no. And irrespective of whether it is a developed or a developing country, ask these same elites if they're ready to go to war to protect their territorial integrity and honor, and you'll have a very speedy response will come out as a strong and loud yes. And this is, I think, where the disjuncture and the problem is. So again, health and environmental calamities, I believe they will only increase. And again, we should push ruling elites all across the world to change their self-beliefs, their self-perceptions, their self-images, so they can answer our questions on health, medical, and environmental emergencies with a strong and loud yes, the same that they do with military security threats. And this is what I think is the need of the hour if we need to save our present and future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Franza. Some points that you have made. You talked about three possibilities that have emerged out of this, due to corona virus. You talked about the disjuncture between state and civil society centered speech acts. You talked about how the definition of security in itself should be whole encompassing, and it should also include the non-military sectors as well. You talked about how we need to revive the cooperative security debates. Uh, you concluded by saying that the health and environmental calamities will only increase, and our decision-making elites need to be sensitized about this. It was very enlightening discussion from your side. We have our policy advisor in the center, Lieutenant General retired Naeem Lodi Saab with us. I'll be he would want to comment on certain aspects related to how he foresees the world. Before he start, I would want to express my condolences on behalf of my center because his father has expired recently. Uh, Over to you, sir. I have unmuted your audio call. You can speak. Naim Lodi Saab, can you hear us, sir? Naim Lodi Saab, we cannot hear you. I believe we are facing some technical issue from Naim Lodi Saab's side. We'll be starting off with our question and answers. I have first question for Dr. Ilhan. Uh, Sir, I want to have your comment on this question. How has COVID-19 been and continues a test of leadership world over? What does history tell us about leaders dealing with such crises in the past?
Well, unfortunately, what this crisis and many others before show us is that there is a very, very strong tendency for leaderships, whether they are autocratic or whether they are democratic, it's another question. But there is a very strong tendency for leaderships to basically ignore or minimize threats that they feel are somehow incongruent with either their worldview or with their short term political interests. A very good example, of course, which is taught as a classical instance of this, is what happened in Europe after the First World War, with reference to the emergence of Nazi Germany and the policy of appeasement that was adopted towards it. And the interesting thing about that policy is that although, of course, there were a few people who pointed out that it was the wrong policy in that context, the overwhelming majority of people, as well as the overwhelming majority of political leaders, basically continued to operate in the delusion that they could somehow do business with the Nazis, and Hitler did not really mean all the things that he had written about and the things which his party stood for. The result, of course, was the Second World War and tens of millions of people needlessly killed and many times that injured or displaced. We see this very clearly as well in the context of the current crisis. And we see this with a few notable exceptions to have been something which practically all leaderships fell prey to. So when this virus first emerges as a threat on the WHO radar, most of the world's advanced countries, barring a few like South Korea, Taiwan, etc., they basically try to ignore what is happening and they pretend that they can continue with business as usual, uh, and that this is not something that is really going to affect them all that much. They imagine that it can stay somehow contained to China and not affect them that badly. And this sort of wishful thinking leads to the catastrophe that many of these societies are now facing. If you look at the United States, if you look at England, even if you look at France, if you look at Spain, of course, Italy, etc. So you have this sort of problem in a sense that the coronavirus acted as a kind of objective reality test. And the vast majority of the world's leaders failed that test, and they failed it very badly. Unfortunately, what history shows us is that those who are in power, they tend to believe that they can control reality more than they can in fact control it. This is a psychological effect of power on a psychological effect that results from being in authority. And that delusion, that mania, leads to a repetition of these disasters, what the ancient Greeks used to call hubris, a false sense of pride and invulnerability in the face of nature and providence. Thank you.
Thank you. Lodi Saab, I've unmuted you. Can you hear us? Do you want to speak now? I think we'll have next question. Sajad Ahmed, one of our team members, has one question from Dr. Farhan Siddiqui. What will be the impact of COVID-19 on CPEC, and how does it affect the Pakistan-China relationship?
Well, for now at least, I was just reading news today that the Prime Minister has advised that the situation, for the coronavirus is tackled as immediately as possible, and that we need to begin work as soon as possible, both on our construction industry and CPEC as well. So again, I think this would be one of our topmost priorities. Because our economy, which was already suffering, is again, after the virus, the economy is again in a state of depression. So I see Pakistan and China moving forward, going together and pushing the momentum for CPEC so that this entire process and wheel of socioeconomic development and growth, it goes forth as soon as possible.
One of our participants who has joined this session from outside, he has posed a question for Dr. Tughral Yamin Saab. He has asked, his name is Zaki Khalid. Zaki Khalid has asked that is the internet architecture in Pakistan able to cope with rising internet use and access needs, keeping in view the limited undersea cables that can be easily disrupted? Over to you, Dr. Tughral Yamin Saab.
I think this is a very good question. As we have noticed in the past few weeks, we have come to increasingly dependent on our internets, whether it's myself, my wife, my children who have flown the nest, or my mother who is an octogenarian. Everybody is now using internet. Internet is fatigued. In Pakistan, internet coverage is not very widespread. We already know that in our university also there are some students from remote areas like Gilgit-Baltistan and the former tribal areas who are complaining that they do not have access to internet or their bandwidth is less. So yes, there is a problem, although Pakistan is coming up with alternate means of internet communication. It's not the only SeeMe which is connecting us with the rest of the world. We have a direct fiber link with China. We need more internet. I'm sure Ms. Tanya Idrus is doing her best to make our internet widespread, increasing its bandwidth quality and all those things which are associated with internet. all our businesses now on internet. And as I was saying, that this will be a watershed moment in our lives. You will see that sooner or later we will be conducting all kinds of business, whether it's personal business, whether it's business, the official business, it will all be online. So yes, we have to make our internet secure. Another thing, which is something very, very scary, if you want to halt the functioning of a government today, you just have to target its internet. You don't have to bomb them. You just target that internet. If you are able to disrupt the internet services, everything will come down. And I am sitting, my internet hours have increased many-fold because I have nothing else to do. I have to prepare my lectures. I have to put them online. I have to speak to my students. I have to, I'm now participating in this webinar, but I see many more webinars happening. So if there is no internet, uh, abusive fathers or husbands will become more abusive, because this is the only escape. You have to, even if you're indulging in such flimsy uh, pastimes as watching a movie on Netflix, even that is your diversion from just watching your wife or your children. So I think, yes, internet has to be strengthened. It has to be more robust. More robust. It has to be, a country has to be able to survive cyber attacks. Nobody has thought of it at the moment, but this can be one way of bringing a country to its knees. You don't have to fight a war. Actual wars are a thing of the past. Uh, uh, this pandemic can kill more people than a nuclear bomb can, can ever will. And secondly, if you want a country to collapse, Dr. Farhan Siddiqui was mentioning that Moody has downrated us and said that our growth would be only 2 to 2.5%. I think in the existing circumstances, I think we were already headed that way. But if you really, really want even that growth to stop, you just fail the internet. You bring down, you crash the systems, and you will not be able to afford the downtimes. A minute's downtime can cost millions and billions of dollars. And if the entire country is in a cyber gloom, if you're not able to do any business, what will you do? The frustrations will increase. So yes, we have to improve our internet services. We have to improve our the sea lines, the underwater cables. We must have multiple cables. The government has to really look into the digital future. This is one major lesson that we have to draw from this pandemic. I hope I've made myself clear.
Apt response, sir. Thank you. The next question is from Mr. Usman Shahid, another external participant in this webinar. His question is directed towards Dr. Farhan Anif Siddiqui Saab. Is COVID-19 going to teach any lesson to authoritarian regimes that control and monopolize information flow? He has further commented that Dr. Farhan Anif Siddiqui doesn't seem much hopeful as to post-COVID-19 situation, that it will bring more democracy and humility, whereas the other panelists seems optimistic. Please, sir, comment.
Yes, I think not only authoritarian regimes, but the manner in which democratic regimes are contending with the flow of information over, the virus, the pandemic, and again, their self-beliefs and speech acts about the kind of destruction or death that it can cause, the measures that need to be put in place. I think they're just not ready for it at all. Very recently there was the VDEM Institute came out with its annual report, in which says, again, only supports earlier studies that the trend of democratic deconsolidation is already taking place, that states that were even democratic are now going down the authoritarian autocratic route. So again, the kind of power that these populist leaders are exercising even in the democratic states, that puts all citizens of all states at risk, because again, in a globalized world where it is far easier For example, for diseases to travel from one state and society to another, as Ilhan was mentioning about global pandemics in the 20th century, I think the sense of urgency now is that this, can spread very, very, very quickly and rapidly. So again, whether authoritarian regimes, and not only authoritarian, but even the democratic ones, uh, educating publics, again, identifying what these threats are, changing their speech acts and self-images and self-perceptions towards more society-oriented dynamics. I think this is the way forward in a post-coronavirus scenario, and nothing else would do.
Thank you, sir. I believe that General Naeem Lodi Saab can hear us.
जी
And
जी मैं आपकी आवाज़ सुन रहा हूँ, थैंक यू।
सर, आप अपने कमेंट्स देना चाहें
अभी मेरी आवाज़ आ रही है आपको?
जी सर, आज
जी अब आप बताइए, आपने क्या कहा, क्योंकि मैं सुन नहीं पाया।
सर, हमारा जो टॉपिक है वो है ऑल्टर्ड।
जी दैट आई नो, दैट अभी आप मुझे बोलने की इजाज़त दे रहे हैं?
जी जी सर।
जी बहुत शुक्रिया। पहले तो मेरी तरफ से माजरत कि मैं आपके तीनों स्पीकर को अच्छे तरीके से नहीं सुन सका। बहुत अच्छे लोग आपने बुलाए हैं और ज़रूर उन्होंने बहुत अहम बात की होगी। तो अभी जो आप गुफ्तगू कर रहे हैं कि ये क्या फ़र्क डालेगा कोरोना आइंदा, उसमें तो मेरा अपना ये अंदाज़ा है कि फ़र्क तो ये डालेगा और बहुत बड़ा फ़र्क डालेगा तीनों एस्पेक्ट्स पर, जियो इकोनॉमी के ऊपर, जियो स्ट्रेटजी के ऊपर, जियो पॉलिटिक्स के ऊपर। लेकिन मैं ये बात कहने से इज्तनाब करूंगा कि वो क्या फ़र्क होगा, क्योंकि जैसे अभी आपने बात की कि क्या मुल्क ज़्यादा डेमोक्रेटाइज हो जाएंगे या ज़्यादा ऑटोक्रेटिक होंगे, और बड़ा अच्छा जवाब दिया है आपके स्पीकर ने कि ये कुछ भी हो सकता है। उसकी वजह ये है कि अभी तक कोरोना का जो मुकम्मल इफेक्ट है वो भी आपके सामने आना है। अभी तो आप देखें ना, अभी तो हम उस प्रोसेस में से गुजर रहे हैं, और इसके बाद जब चीज़ें खुलेंगी कि क्या ये एक नेचुरल फिनोमेना था या मैन मेड फिनोमेना था, अगर यही एक सवाल का जवाब नफ़ी या हाँ में हो तो ये एक बहुत बड़ा फ़र्क तो इधर ही आ जाएगा। अगर ये दुनिया मान ले कि ये एक नेचुरल फिनोमेना था तो दुनिया और तरीके से चलेगी। अगर ये पता चल जाए कि ये मैन मेड था तो दुनिया बिल्कुल और तरीके से चलेगी। ये मेरा अपना अंदाज़ा है। मैं पहले जियो इकोनॉमी के बारे में तो ज़्यादा साफ ज़रा मैं जानता नहीं हूँ, लेकिन इतना मैं ज़रूर कहूँ, मुझे खदशा है, बल्कि मैं ये कहूँ कि मुझे उम्मीद है कि शायद पेट्रो डॉलर की जो हेजमनी है और वो शायद ख़त्म नहीं होगी तो कम ज़रूर हो जाएगी। उनकी जो एक मोनोपोली है डॉलर की, वो शायद दुनिया में कम हो जाए। इस बात को तो मैं यहीं पे छोड़ देता हूँ। जो जियो पॉलिटिक्स है उस पर यह फ़र्क पड़ सकता है कि दो इम्कानात हैं बिल्कुल क्लियर कट, क्योंकि ये तो दुनिया अब समझ लेगी कि हमारा जो फ्यूचर है वो कॉमन है। लेकिन दुनिया इस सिलसिले में सेल्फिश भी हो सकती है, क्योंकि अगर तमाम वसाइल जो हैं वो आप बेहतर तरीके से बांट ना सकें तो फिर ये कोशिश होती है कि वो वसाइल पर कब्जा कर लिया जाए ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा। तो या तो आप देखेंगे कि कुछ मुल्क बहुत सेल्फिश हो जाएंगे और अपनी रिसोर्सेज के ऊपर ज़्यादा जारादारी अपनी वो कायम करेंगे, और ये भी मुमकिन है कि अगर दुनिया में अच्छे लीडरशिप आ जाए तो वो इनको आपस में बांट लें। जो मैंने इंसानियत की हिस्ट्री पढ़ी है, और आप लोग भी ज़्यादा जानते हैं, इल्हान साहब यहाँ मौजूद हैं, मेरा अपना ख्याल ये है कि सम और दी अदर वजह जो भी है, ज़्यादातर नेगेटिविटी इंसानी सोच में ज़्यादा है पॉजिटिविटी के मुकाबले में। तो मुझे ये खदशा है कि कहीं ऐसा ना हो कि जो ताकतवर मुल्क है, और ताकतवर कौन उभरेगा ये तो बाद में देखेंगे, कि जो ताकतवर मुल्क हैं हो सकता है को ज़्यादा जारादारी कायम करने की कोशिश करें दुनिया की रिसोर्सेज के ऊपर, और सिर्फ अपने लोगों के जो है ना वो फिक्र हो उनको कि ये लोग कायम रहें और बाकियों के बारे में उनकी फिक्र कम हो जाए। इसका इम्कान मौजूद है, और अलबत्ता ये भी हो सकता है कि बहुत अच्छे अच्छे लीडर आ जाएं जो कि इसके उलट हो। जहाँ तक जियो स्ट्रेटजी है उसकी आज हम बात नहीं करेंगे, उसमें तो बहुत बड़ा चेंज आएगा। जंग की डेफिनेशन चेंज हो जाएगी, थ्रेशोल्ड चेंज हो जाएंगे, डिटरेंस का कॉन्सेप्ट चेंज हो जाएगा। क्योंकि देखें, जब एटम बम फटा था तो उसके बाद लोगों को एहसास हुआ था कि ये एक बहुत मोजी चीज़ है। अब जबकि ये हमारे सामने आया तो अब हमें अंदाज़ा हुआ है कि बायोलॉजिकल वॉरफेयर जो है वो किस नौयत की हो सकती है। तो अब जो है वो थ्रेशोल्ड भी चेंज होंगे, थ्रेट्स भी चेंज होंगे और ये सारी चीज़ें चेंज होंगी। तो अभी मेरा ख्याल है कि बड़ी अच्छी है कि हम ये गुफ्तगू कर रहे हैं, इसको हम जारी रखें और आहिस्ता-आहिस्ता आगे देखें कि क्या होता है। दुआ ये करनी चाहिए कि पॉजिटिविटी ज़्यादा बढ़े, लेकिन इस चीज़ का खदशा मौजूद है कि नेगेटिविटी भी ज़्यादा बढ़ सकती है। जी, थैंक यू।
शुक्रिया जनरल साहब। एक और क्वेश्चन हम लेंगे अगेन फ्रॉम जकी खालिद साहब. That question is directed towards Dr. Farhan Hanif Siddiqui साहब. Do you personally expect that existing national security apparatuses in the third world countries would give due weightage to advice by non-traditional security experts, such as in health, environment, etc.?
Meaning it's already happening in one sense. Environment has been defined as a major urgent threat, as an existential threat by the present government. It took initiatives with respect to environment, the PTI government in KP. There's a billion tree tsunami project which is already underway. At the end, the point is that they have to. There's just no two opinions about it. Because when environmental hazards can cause all sorts of conflict situations between communities. There's a lot of literature in Africa, Asia in this regard. So in that sense, yes, the third world elites have to be more sensitive because again, environment, economics, what were considered previously as issues of low politics. These are no more issues of low politics. These are issues of high politics now. And it's again, the elites world over, not only in the third world. You can see skepticism about environment within the first world states as well. So again, state elites, as soon as they or as quickly they realize that this is an urgent risk that needs to be attended to, the better it is for both states and societies all across the world.
मैं एक बात करना चाहूँगा इस सिलसिले में.
Sure, sir, please.
जी, मैं ये कहना चाहूँगा कि देखिए सिक्योरिटी अपरेटस का मेरा ख्याल है कि डेफिनेशन ही चेंज हो जाएगी. अब जब हम बात करते हैं ना कि सिक्योरिटी अपरेटस और क्या वो बाकी जो इनपुट्स हैं उसको लेने के लिए आमादा हो जाएंगे, तो मेरा नहीं ख्याल कि अभी सिक्योरिटी अपरेटस का मतलब टैंक और ये हवाई जहाज और ये बमबार जहाज होंगे. सिक्योरिटी अपरेटस ही ये होगा कि आपकी वैक्सीन कितनी स्ट्रांग है, आपके जीन्स कितने स्ट्रांग हैं, आप में जीन्स को मॉडिफाई करने की अहलियत क्या है, आप लोगों के ज़हनों को कैसे उनके ऊपर हावी हो सकते हैं, ज़हनों को कमज़ोर कैसे किया जा सकता है, ताकतवर कैसे किया जा सकता है. तो ये पूरा एक कॉन्सेप्ट चेंज हो जाएगा. तो वो जो आप जिसको सिक्योरिटी ऑपरेटर्स कह रहे हैं, यही सिक्योरिटी ऑपरेटर्स बन जाएगा, जिसमें कि वैक्सीन्स तैयार होंगी, जिसमें शायद वायरसेस तैयार हों, जिसमें जेनेटिक मॉडिफिकेशंस के फार्मूले तैयार हों और उसके तरीकों पर गौर व फिक्र किया जाए. तो मेरा ख्याल है कि बहुत बड़ा चेंज आएगा जो शायद अभी हम उसका इदराक भी ना कर सकें और शायद उसकी इमेजिनेशन भी मुश्किल हो. जी.
बहुत शुक्रिया सर. The next question is directed towards Dr. Ilhan Niaz. This question has been posted here by one of my colleagues, Sayyid Ali Hadi. And I believe that Dr. Farhan Hanif Siddiqui Saab can also pitch in after Dr. Ilhan Niaz. He has written that in such crises, the most affected sector of our society is the youth of Pakistan. That is pursuing different degrees at the public sector universities. How the professors, how both of you with the university administration as well as the HAC has constructed a plan so as to cater for those students who are currently pursuing their careers and for those who have recently passed out but have yet to join the job market.
Nikhil, just one quick point reference what General Saab said, and I'll come to the question. There is, by and large, a scientific understanding that no country has made this virus as a weapon. And it would seem somewhat odd for, let's say, the US to have made it as a weapon, given that they are going to be far more affected by it than the Chinese. So it would be a sort of, nuclear hand grenade sort of approach if they have indeed done it. Coming to the question itself, I'm afraid that most of the public sector universities in Pakistan, and I can, share details about Quaid-e-Azam University in particular, they have been facing severe budget cuts to their recurring amounts prior to the onset of this crisis. We really don't have money to meet our recurring expenditure. So already our ability to respond to this crisis and to rapidly change over to another kind of learning environment, as it were, was severely handicapped by the fact that our public sector universities, many of them, including Quaid-e-Azam, including Peshawar, many others, Karachi University, etc., they are operating in the deep red. And there is no prospect in good times that they would be bailed out by the government. Then when we talk about as far as student services and the effect on them is concerned, I am afraid that the very harsh and unfortunate truth about Pakistan is that while we like to talk about the youth of Pakistan, the fact is that we do not invest in them. And the consistent policy of the government of Pakistan since its inception has been to systematically deprive those areas of health, education, employment generation, skills, etc., which would actually benefit the youth. And this is, of course, also partly something which is related to our catastrophic failure in terms of population planning, a subject that we can't even really discuss because of various sensitivities. So, I mean, just to give you a blunt example of this, the territories that presently comprise Pakistan had about 30 million people in 1947. 70 years later, they have approximately 210. That's a sevenfold increase over 70 years. So under those circumstances, with the population growth rate still growing at 2.5% a year, slightly more than our economic growth rate, I'm afraid the youth of Pakistan, they are the current generation, like the previous generations, they are basically being thrown to the wolves. That is unfortunately what is happening and what has happened in the past.
Dr. Franza, would you like to comment on this?
I agree with what Ilhan has said in terms of how budget cuts, to the higher education sector, that has been one of the most persistent problems in the past, year, and it makes difficult any university initiatives towards, the kind of employment or other opportunities that the university wants to provide to the students. And this combines also with the online teaching fiasco, which is, come out into the open. And as, Dr. Tughral, Yamin was saying at the beginning that, we started off with online classes, but you had students in peripheral areas, for example, students in Awaran or Khuzdar or even in Gilgit-Baltistan, Hunza Nagar, these places who just could not come up to it. So again, the challenge going into, the near-term future is exactly this for universities, that how do you bring all students on board and operate with online teaching smoothly and do not leave any students out of it. Because at the end of the day, if you continue with online teaching, but you have students who cannot participate, again, this adds a great burden on what universities are supposed to do once the semester resumes. So that, I think, is a very, very big challenge.
So I would like to add a few things over here with your permission.
Sure, please, sir.
NUST is one of those universities which has made a considered decision to continue with online education. And Tala Saab, before this crisis, I was advocating MS online for army officers deployed in former tribal areas. I thought that these young men who are putting their lives in the line of fire for us and who are not employed on operations 24 hours a day should get a chance to study in their spare time. Uh, I this this was not my idea. The army wanted it. Uh, Unfortunately, it was not finding traction. I had gone to HEC about a week ago with the proposal, and the reply that I got from them was that, look, one, we have not come up with a clear-cut policy on it. And secondly, we feel that some universities would be making it a sort of a money-making exercise. I said, no, it's not for that. It's for the public good of people. And if this experiment succeeds, it will help many other people to hook on to this informal or remote way of learning. I was told that this at the moment is only permitted to Allama Iqbal Open University, distance learning, and to virtual university. And just not even 10 days later, this crisis broke out and HEC said, go ahead with online education. And I tell you, I have been talking to people, ours is basically a science and technology university. They've been telling me, yes, we have got Google chat rooms, we have business Skype and business. There are other platforms which you can use for online education, but nobody was practically giving me a demonstration. And as soon as we were told that we have to do it, people took it, barring people living in, as Dr. Farhan Siddiqui said, in remote areas like Avaran or Baltistan or other places. People took it like fish to water. You see, first experiment that I conducted on online classes was with a young man who's a domestic help with my wife. I said, okay, you hold your smartphone, I will sit in my room. And we went on Zoom and it was perfect. There was no problem. And soon thereafter, my wife, who runs a charity school, she was conversing with, holding meetings on online with young teachers who were basically coming from the village. They were all sitting down, they were talking, they were devising strategies. So I think, and what Dr. Ilhan Saab said and Dr. Farhan Saab said, look, if there are budget cuts, this is the perfect solution, perfect recipes to break out of this logjam. If you don't have budgets to pay for your electricity bills, for your maintenance, uh, then come online. You don't have to sit in your classrooms today, just before this webinar, and that is the reason you delayed it by 15 minutes. I was having a class, and there were 29 students, and they were perfectly in sync with what I was saying. They were popping questions, they were raising hands, we were communicating very well. So I think one thing which will happen after this crisis is over, you will see that the physical structures will become redundant. We will very quickly go on to online education, and we will be needing less money from HEC for other purposes. Perhaps, yes, you would be requiring more money from the HEC to provide better internet services to your students in Balochistan and other remote areas, FATA and former FATA and Gilgit-Baltistan. But you will see in the final analysis, this will succeed. There is no other solution, and you will see that you will need lesser budgets. You will see that it will provide the professors, the managers of higher education more autonomy, more flexibility to design their courses. I just designed a course. The course's name was how to crisis management in times of pandemic. It made me think. So I think the future is online education. We will move there. The think tanks will not be needing offices, webinars, podcasts. These are the things which will be happening, and they have started happening. You see, you've taken the lead on it. I was thinking that the next thing I will do would hold a webinar, but you have taken a lead on it. You've stolen a march. So I think, although the two other gentlemen are much younger than me, I am very positive that we will succeed, inshallah, over here. Thank you.
So that's heartening to hear that we have taken the lead. This all this plan was formulated at a very short notice, and there is a certain flexibility in our approach. Although the team is working from home, but the way we have worked in the past and the way we carry out our tasking, it made it easier for us to or conduct this session at a very short notice. Sir, another question that has been directed towards you by one of my team members, Fahad Nabil. He has asked, how do you see the future of privacy in post-COVID world?
You see, privacy, I think this is also being, as you said, it will be discarded to the dustbin of history. You said yourself that many things, many ideas, many old concepts will vanish. Privacy is a problem. On Zoom, for example, there has been, I was reading that Zoom is putting the Zoom users' data online. They are making it public. So there are problems, but when there is a problem, solutions will come. In my class, I was just referring to one of the students. I told her that I have got CCTV cameras in my house just to monitor the traffic outside my house. It is not to intrude into my neighbor's privacy, but it is to see that if, God forbid, somebody wants to break into my house. So privacy, yes, nobody is objected to my CCTV cameras. Every other house has a CCTV camera. So privacy, yes, privacy will be a problem, but I'm sure there'll be solutions like, for example, face blurring. Already you see on many of the platforms, Zoom, I think Microsoft Teams also, you have this blurring of your background, not your face. But I think blurring of gory scenes or things like that, it's not difficult. I think technology is expanding at such a vast pace. There's such an exponential change that is going to happen that I'm sure. You see, many years ago, many decades ago, I attended the Staff College in Germany, and there I was just musing. They took us to a publishing house in Hamburg. They said this is the biggest publishing house. I said, one day perhaps you will be not having these books. Perhaps we'll be having it something like an ebook. I couldn't exactly articulate my thoughts, but that's what's happening now. You ask your librarian for a book, he'll send you a PDF file of a good book, which was otherwise not available in Said Book Bank or elsewhere. So things are changing at such a fast pace. You will see that things will change.
एक बात मैं करना चाहूंगा
जी सर सॉरी
जी जी आप डॉक्टर साहब आप कंप्लीट करें
नहीं सर आप बोले
मैं प्राइवेसी के बारे में बात कर रहा था कि असल में इतनी ज्यादा इंट्रूजन हो जाएगी आप विद द पैसेज ऑफ टाइम जब हम ये सारी चीजें यूज करेंगे पर्सनल प्राइवेसी में कि प्राइवेसी का कॉन्सेप्ट भी थोड़ा सा चेंज हो जाएगा कि छुपाने वाली चीजें रह ही बहुत कम जाएंगी और शायद छुपाना लोग बंद कर देंगे अभी मिसाल के तौर पे ये बात भी मैं छुपाने की कोशिश करता हूँ कि मैं डॉक्टर तुगरल यामीन साहब को बहुत बड़ी अच्छी तरह जानता हूँ हमारी क्या रिलेशनशिप है लेकिन हो सकता है इसके बाद मैं समझूं कि ये कोई छुपाने वाली बात नहीं है अभी ये बड़ी छुपाने वाली बात है कि फॉर एग्जांपल मैं 65 साल का बंदा अगर किसी खातून से बात करता हूँ तो ये आजकल में बड़ी छुपाने वाली बात है मेरा ख्याल ये छुप नहीं पाएगी और आइंदा मैं छुपाने की कोशिश भी नहीं करूंगा तो ये जो छुपाने वाली चीजें एक तो रह कम जाएंगी और दूसरा हमारे अपने रवैयों में फर्क पड़ जाएगा हम कहेंगे छोड़ो यार अब क्या छुपाना है सबको पता तो है थैंक यू
We'll be taking last two questions and then we'll be concluding this webinar. Next question is by Mariam Rashid. She is working as a research assistant at our center. Her question is directed towards Dr. Farhan. Sir, what imaginaries would be a post COVID-19 world be built on in terms of the global world order? How do you foresee it?
I think the nature of the world has to become more conciliatory towards non-military security issues. That is one. And the kind of world elites that exist now are sadly and unfortunately not up to the task in realizing what these non-military security threats are and why they are imperative and how they are important. Just look across how they have reacted to the tragedy of the coronavirus epidemic. Only now they're getting a bit more sensitive to the idea that they need to do more, but initially this was not the case. So the reluctance basically tells you the kind of importance they attach again to health, medical, environmental, social problems and anxieties that exist for people out there. So the imaginary that I foresee is an imaginary of a disjuncture, again, between state and civil society. It was already manifesting itself before the virus broke out. You had protests all across the globe, Middle East, Latin America, Asia, with people demanding, again, to put it as simply as possible, basic necessities of life. And this only exacerbates the challenge for state elites. Because this imaginary of this disjuncture between what the civil society wants and what the state elites believe are most imperative issues, this divide, I think, will be fundamental. So in that sense, state elites have to become more sensitive towards the idea of social and economic development, not just say it in their speech, but actually implement it in terms of policies. Uh, and again, if they do not do it, if it goes along as it is, if these non-traditional security threats are not realized as imperative, um, I believe that civil society responses will become more severe. And the problem is that state elites who do not have the capacity or even the capacity or the capability to rethink their orientations towards society, they will again use this as an opportunity to blame who they believe are others, whether it be minorities, whether it be the opposition, even it be media, even it be any element of the civil society at large. So at least for the near term, medium term future, I see this disjuncture, this imaginary of this disjuncture manifesting itself more vividly than anything else.
So the final question is from Hamras Sirwani, research assistant at the center. Because this question has previously been addressed by Dr. Tughral Yamin Saab in the context of privacy. This question has now been redirected towards Dr. Ilhan and yourself, Dr. Farhan. He has said that the new normal is pushing humanity into a sharper digital nativity. And does this mean that there will be an increased monopolization of the public space, this new public space, this online public space by the authorities?
Right. Well, if should I go first?
Yes, please.
Oh, all right. Well, there are a couple of things over here. The first is that when the internet came around, it was generally thought that this would be a very sort of liberating, leveling kind of technology, it will provide access, it will do all sorts of wonderful things. And it certainly has done a lot of wonderful things, like, ebooks and all sorts of other learning tools, etc., are available. But at the same time, if we look at the structure of the internet, what we basically see is that currently there are two types of internet in operation. One is the Chinese style Great Firewall model, in which there is intrusive and extensive surveillance of practically all online activity in that country. There's no privacy in that sense. And the other model is, let's say, the Western model, which has become a kind of a cartel in which you have a small number of really big players like Facebook and Google and Microsoft and a few others as well. And they basically account for the bulk of the internet usage. And those corporations, they offer a service ostensibly for free, but in fact, it's not free because the data and the different kinds of patterns that emerges, the analytics that emerge, that are very, very useful to them for economic purposes and also for political purposes, as we saw in elections and other things. So you have this situation where either your data is the property of the state, i.e. the Chinese model, a sort of data communism, or you have a situation where your data is the basically property of very powerful capitalists, which is the American or Western model of the internet. In both cases, what you of course have is that ordinary people sacrifice their data and therefore their privacy either to corporations or to governments. And in exchange for that, they receive a far greater amount of convenience. So everything is at your fingertips. Communication is so much easier. You can play games. You can entertain yourself. You can do whatever you feel like, basically. And it's all at your fingertips. And it's so seductively convenient that the bargain that you are getting into doesn't really feel painful or difficult at all. Now, this is very interesting because as someone who studies authoritarianism and studies different power structures, if we look at totalitarian or oligopolistic models from earlier periods in history, what we find is that these models require a lot of effort by the concerned agencies to actually gather and monopolize data, information. There was a very heavy footprint that pre-internet totalitarian or authoritarian societies would have to engage in. And that footprint was also not 100% effective, this precisely because it was operated by human beings, and human beings are fallible. But now you're heading towards a world where basically governments and corporations can predict your behavior based upon the data you've either surrendered to them or volunteered to them. And they can use that for any number of purposes. And you have no control over whether those purposes are benign or whether those purposes are malevolent. So that, I think, is basically the key to understanding where your loss of privacy leads you to. It leads you to a situation where you are essentially at the mercy of immense power structures. And these power structures, while they are being kind to you or indulgent towards you, they are providing you with great convenience. But that can also change, and that can change to your lasting detriment if you're not careful. So that makes it easier to silence dissent. It makes it easier to target people. It makes it easier to, unleash a Twitter mob, as happens in Pakistan, or targeted individuals. It allows for various forms of punishment to be meted out to people who don't conform or who do not think or act in a socially or politically appropriate way. And this can all be done without, the old-fashioned men in, big overcoats showing up outside your house or hanging around, which was associated with, let's say, the Gestapo or with the Soviet NKVD or KGB or the old forms of oppression. And so it's very insidious in that sense. It's very, very difficult to avoid. And we are all ensnared by it in that sense. Thank you.
Dr. Franza, would you like to add?
Yes, so the question again was?
The question was that as we are, the new normal is pushing us into a sharper digital nativity. So what do you foresee about there will be whether there will be an increased monopolization of the public space by the authorities, this new digital public space by the authorities? That is a question.
Yeah, meaning it, I think the best way to answer this question is, fall back and, just think for a, second, if this is only a fleeting moment, that this will occur again, let's say after the next 100 years, and that these calamities, for example, health or environmental, uh, these are only a passing moment. Uh, and this is, I think, the answer to this question will determine what kind of discourse will prevail in the public space, both on the part of state elites and civil society elites. So what we're seeing now is that the nature and the level and the intensity of such threats will only increase over time. So yes, for in terms of the public debate, state elites would want to give as little attention to this discourse because, let's say the larger or the bigger military industrial complexes or capitalist, let's say, market forces, for them, this is not a concern that should come out into the public space because that negatively impacts what state elites and these corporations do in terms of making money. So again, the public space, I think it will still be very contested. The discourse, the arguments of what are military threats, this will not just completely wither away. It will remain, and this is the exact challenge of how do we push this discourse to a point where it does not captivate the imagination of people living in a society. So what is the existential threat that we face? Is it the threat of we being invaded by a neighbor militarily? Or is it the threat of not having enough provisions to survive on a daily basis? And what this coronavirus, again, pandemic, uh, you know, helps us rethink is again this notion of providing basic services to the people. And that in essence should be the goal of states going into the future.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Farhani sir. I'll be concluding the session now. I would like to start by expressing my gratitude towards General Naeem Lodi Saab for giving his valuable insight and joining us at the very last minute, especially during this challenging time when he and his family is also coping up with the unfortunate demise of his father. The center expresses its condolences. Apart from that, the center also feels obliged towards you, Dr. Tughral Yamin Saab, Dr. Ilhan Yah Saab, and Dr. Farhan Hanif Siddiqui Saab, that you took out time for us on a very short notice and became a part of this trial run that marked our foray into this new mode of virtual conferencing. Your remarkable deliberations and consistent benevolence have always been a source of encouragement for us to explore new avenues of research undauntingly. Um as now I am concluding the seminar, I will share the YouTube video link with you with the speakers. This video was being live streamed. I'll share the video link with you. I also thank the team for running the show from behind, and also thank the participants who have been listening to us speaking about the altered state of world post COVID-19. Thank you so much. I'll be ending this
Thank you.
seminar.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Thank you, Talal.
Thanks a lot.